Well, I was trying to start the pony motor again, and I heard a pop down in there somewhere, and then I got a big puff of white smoke out of the pony motor exhaust pipe. Man, I'm pissed. At least frustrated at myself. Not sure what happened, but now it won't start at all, so gosh. Well, I'll figure it out. This is the instructions for the starting engine crankcase. So basically the pony motor, how to empty the oil, and where the new oil goes in. Alright, let's put some new motor oil in the pony motor. Well, that's not going to work. Pretty thin. Some fuel definitely got into the oil after after it shut down. I forgot to shut off the fuel real quick, like I normally do once it starts. So we'll drain this out, put some new stuff in there, and then we're going to test the compression on this pony motor I want to see what it's pushing. I don't really know what's wrong with the pony motor yet, but it's free. It moves by hand with the, there's a spot where you can wrap a rope around and pull start it. And so, I know, I mean, that's good. At least it's not locked up, but hopefully it's nothing too bad. Oh yeah. Smell the fuel. Found a more appropriate Caterpillar bolt. Just make sure it fits. Alright, good. And then this thing was leaking, so I've got a washer, and I've got a little metal washer that's going to push against this flat rubber washer. And hopefully that seals up the leak. It wasn't a bad leak, it was just like a drip here or there, but more than it should have been. Right at full. Alright, I got the spark plug out. Got this tightened in there. This is one of my compression testers. Well, now the belt is slipping. The pony motor belt, starter belt is bad, hence I bought a new one. I think it's time to deal with that. Since that belt is slipping, I'm just going to go ahead and try it with this hand. This is basically you wrap a rope around this pulley here. And then you can pull it like a lawnmower. So 75 psi. That's just me pulling it by hand. I'm gonna try it one more time. Still around 75. I'd like to see more than that, but I mean, at least we have compression. here are the two belts for the pony motor. There's this one, this is the starter here, goes down around that main shaft, and that belt is the problem with starting this thing. It gets so oily because there's a leak. Pony motor has an oil leak somewhere right in this area. Not sure what it is yet. And then it just slips down here on this pulley trying to start the thing because it's so stretched out that it can't grab well. And then there's the other belt over there, which is right behind it, goes over to the pony motor there. So we're gonna replace both of them, and I'm gonna start by taking this off. We're gonna kind of take a few more things off and kind of see if we can figure out where the leak is coming from on the pony motor and do a little diagnosis and maybe figure out if we have a problem with the pony motor or not. I think we do, but not sure what it is yet. So that's how you tension the belt for the starter. And this belt, even fully tightened, fully tensioned, had still a ton of slack. So that's the gear that engages with the starter here. So those teeth actually look great. They're all in very good shape. Don't see any big dings or dents. And that gear runs this pulley. And that pulley engages with the starter here. And so when the starter is not running, when you don't put power to it, this gear sits back there a little ways. And then when it gets powered up, energized, it spins forward because it's being turned by the electric motor. And then these teeth engage with this gear, turning that pulley, which then rotates the whole belt around the shaft that this is attached to, starting the pony motor. And so, you know, there is some wear on this front edge of these teeth, but they don't look too bad. All in all, the full length of the teeth actually look very good. There's a gasket here that it looks like it was installed improperly at one point and got pinched off. Oil's leaking over, getting on that pulley, getting on the belt, and then the belt would just slip down here on the pulley for the pony motor trying to get it started. It just wouldn't do it. And so even though that pulley was just spinning like crazy up here, it didn't do anything for getting the motor started down there. So we're gonna get this other belt off. I know I could just cut this, but I'm trying to figure out how to get the new one in there as well. Nothing is easy with this old beast. Well, now I've done it. Gonna wedge the damn thing in there. Finalmente. So I think if I take off this pulley, which this big nut is actually already loose, just got this like washer that's been bent over to kind of keep it. I think if I take this off, I can get, it's probably how I should have gotten the other one off, but I can get to the other one easier. Yep, that's how I should have done it. Well, this is definitely how I should have done it to get the other belt off. So this is the big keyed pulley that essentially lets you have the two belts for the pony motor, and then this groove here is what you would run a string in, and you would pull it in the direction the arrow shows so you could hand start these old machines. And I tried that when I had the machine in the old barn where I found it. I tried my hardest. I could not even get it to budge. Wouldn't even pop. So maybe with a little bit more cleanup we can get it to go by hand. I don't know. Not really overly concerned about that. But this is definitely how you put the new belts on. You put them on in here in this groove, and you slide this pulley back onto the shaft, rather than trying to do what I did. A little bit of water in that case. Probably from pressure washing it. I think the oil from the pony motor is leaking right here, right? And it's a bit frustrating because I had this off in the barn. I had taken this whole piece off to be able to get at, you know, more of the pony motor. And so either I didn't know there was a gasket, which is probably the case, and there probably wasn't one to begin with, so we're going to correct that problem. So if you look real close when I move this, you can kind of see oil seeping out of that joint right there. And so that is what's the cause of all this oil, especially once it gets hot. It essentially leaks out of that, drains down all over this, gets on that belt, gets on the pulleys, and basically causes it to slip. So right here, that's one of the head gaskets. It's not leaking there. Oil for the pony motor goes in here, down this long tube to this little section. Goes down into the motor there, and then I think this is a breather for it, which looks like I'm gonna have to undo these 4 bolts here, and then these 2, and that should give me this whole piece, because that's right there is the carburetor. That's the pony motor's carburetor. This is the magneto. The magneto is essentially what creates the spark. And so inside it are points, and I actually haven't even opened this one up to even look at it. This red wire runs to one of the spark plugs, and then this wire, this black wire here, runs to the other spark plug right underneath that cover. And that's what gives us the spark for the pony motor. The pony motor literally is from here all the way over to the opposite side. It's a dual opposed cylinder. So basically there's a cylinder going that way, cylinder going that way. And then right there in the middle is the crankcase. Let's keep tearing into this a little bit and see what we find. Yep, no gasket. Well, that'll do it. So this is the starter right here. I think I'm gonna go ahead and take it off along with the entire mount that it mounts to, so I can get a better look at the pony motor. And I think there might be another gasket way under there that I need to deal with. I like putting nuts and bolts back where they go, especially if it might be off for any period of time, rather than in a separate tray. If I can avoid having to separate it from the location it goes, I do, because it's one less thing I have to remember. And there's already a ton of things I have to remember. Just like these 2 bolts are back in right here. These 2 bolts are back in right here. It's a little bit more work having to undo them when you go to put it back together. But sometimes when things are apart for longer periods of time, it's nice to know where the bolts go. Unless it's long term, and then I don't do that at all, because at that point, you know, you're doing a ground up. But I think it was also leaking oil right under this seal here. So there's no gasket there. Should be a gasket right here. And then this is the exhaust. The pony motor here. The other problem was that starter essentially had 4 bolts holding it on. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these 2 bolts were barely hand tight. I literally, the nuts, I undid them by hand because, and I know why. The reason was because they're so hard to get into. They were extremely difficult if you had to actually go and tighten them, which I'm gonna have to. And it looks like that stud is loose. That one's tight still. Have to get those in there first, but we're gonna get all this cleaned up. Look at that. Another loose bolt. Look at that. Another loose bolt. Goodness. That's the exhaust too. Don't want to lose the key. Alright, so we got a few things out of the way. Got the gas tank, the air cleaner. We're going to pull the head off on this side of the pony motor and just see what it looks like. So essentially there's a plug wire here. Get that out of the way. Oh, shoot. Well, we're going to need a new plug wire. Because that one broke. Spark plug here. There's 7 bolts right here. So we'll undo those and take a peek. Doesn't look terrible. I'm not seeing any real damage to the gasket, at least this one. Cylinder looks good. This valve here, not sure if it's intake or exhaust, but it is sticking out this way, which maybe there's something jammed in there. I'm gonna grab the actual flywheel that attaches to the shaft, and we're gonna turn this over by hand and just see what it looks like. This gasket does not look in bad shape, and I did read that you can reuse them. In the upper ports up there, this bottom hole and this port, there is a lot of junk and crap. Looks like, you know, rusty sludge buildup. Okay, good. The valves are, it's dirty in there, but they look like they're seating, and the cylinder wall is in great shape. There's not a single scratch on it. It moves smoothly. Well, both valves seem to move just like they should, and the cylinder moves smoothly. And there is some buildup and, you know, carbon buildup and whatnot, but neither one seems to be have any kind of blockage or anything. Man, that is so good. I am so relieved. And it moves fine just pushing it by hand. And like we did earlier, you know, we had, I think it was 75 pounds of pressure on this cylinder when we checked it with the compression tester. So that's great. The gasket itself, I mean, other than having some dirt like in this area, there's no like breakages or spots where it's, you know, broken from like up this port down into the cylinder area. That's when you would have like coolant getting down into the cylinders and then it'd burn off. Usually a white color, and it'd smell like sweet. But I don't see any issues with the gasket on this one, which that is excellent to see. Down in these ports though, there is some gunk buildup, and I might take a real thin screwdriver and just kind of break some of that up and then vacuum it out with a shop vac. I don't want to blow it with an air gun because I really don't want to end up having, you know, stuff getting to some of the places where it shouldn't be. So by vacuuming out I can. I'll leave it like this. I'll leave the cylinder all the way out, leave both valves closed, and we'll try and get as much of that out of there as we can. But I can't tell you how relieved I am. I really thought we did something much bigger to it. So this leads me to believe maybe it's something in the carburetor. We're going to check that, but we are going to pull the other head off the other side too, and just because it's not that hard to do, we might as well. So we'll do that here shortly, but for now we're going to work on at least gently cleaning out these ports. I've just got just a piece of a brass like brazing rod that I put a point on, and then I kind of made a point on this brass punch too. So we're going to start with the little one. So for those of you that don't know, this is your cylinder, your piston head. And so the cylinder is the outer wall that the piston rides in. And so what that does is it creates compression. And so fuel comes down into the cylinder, and then essentially the spark plug is right here. And what happens is, as the piston head comes closer, it compresses the air within the cylinder itself. And around the cylinder are rings, and the rings are what actually ride on the cylinder walls. And essentially the cylinder itself doesn't touch the walls. And so as the piston head comes closer, it's timed essentially with a spark plug on a gasoline engine, because that's what this is. The spark plug ignites, and that causes an explosion inside here, which pushes the cylinder back that way. And what that does is these are intake and exhaust valves. And that explosion basically causes the piston to go back and forth on either side, and that creates the necessary force to turn a shaft or crankshaft. And then that's what's used to create power in engines. And so diesels are different. Diesels don't have a spark plug. They rely only on the compression and fuel that they have in the cylinders. So it's a little bit different. But this is a gasoline. The pony motor is a gasoline engine. So you are looking for problems where the valves don't seat quite perfectly. You're looking for issues where maybe the cylinder walls are all scored up, and the rings that are basically on that piston head are not sealing well. That is what's called low compression. You're looking for, you know, a breakage. This metal thing you see here, there's a gasket. If I peel it off, it's about, you know, real thin. And so it is what seals between the engine block and the head, which is what we pulled off. You're looking for, like, you know, a crack between, like, maybe this port and the cylinder, or like this port and a valve or something. And so I'm not seeing anything with this particular setup on this side that is leading me to believe we've got any issues internally. And so I'm just kind of cleaning this up slightly. It won't hurt anything. And as I always say, you know, just a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of maintenance goes a long way. And obviously Old Red hasn't had much for maintenance, so we're correcting a lot of those problems. All right, so here's a little closer view of the actual piston head going in and out of the cylinder. You can see the cylinder walls are very, not only are they clean, a little bit of oil in there, which is fine, but there are no scratches. I know you can only see this bottom side of it, but all the way around there are no scratches on this cylinder wall, so that's very encouraging. As you can see over here, I'm pushing the flywheel, or the pulley, by hand, and it moves perfectly smoothly. And you see on one stroke, you see, I'm not sure which one of these is intake and exhaust, but on one stroke you see one valve open, then it closes, and then on the other stroke you see the other valve open and close. And so that is how the air is brought in, and then the air is taken out. I am very happy to see this the way it is working and the way it is, the way it looks. So here's the actual head to the pony motor on that side, and the head gasket is what seals up right against this silver surface, the shiny area. And so the inside, where you see this carbon buildup, is essentially where you got the cylinder here and then the two valves. And right in this hole is where the other end of the spark plug comes through. That's where the spark is actually ignited, causing the explosion within the engine block that creates the power. Now you can see in these valves there's some buildup, rust, and whatnot in them from just, these are the coolant flow passages, and just over the years of not having clean coolant, or it just sitting, it just kind of built up in there. You know, all this junk here. And so I'm going to try and get a little bit of it out so it's not all blocked up. Now I'm wondering, maybe that had something to do with the issue I had with the pony motor. I don't know. If you have any ideas, would a stopped up passage like this cause the pony motor to make a popping, like a pop, and then have a big white puff of smoke come out of the exhaust pipe? Let me know in the comments if you know. But for now, we're just going to kind of clean it out as best we can, wipe this down, and then bolt it right back up. See all that rust that was built up in there? All right. Good enough to go back on. Just got off the phone with the dealer, the cat dealer, and they happen to have this gasket in stock. They've got 2 of them. I need 2 of them, and I figure even if this gasket is still good, my thoughts are that I just go ahead and replace it. It's actually pretty affordable. They were only 25 bucks a piece, so you know, for 50 bucks I can replace both head gaskets and be a lot more confident that the head gasket isn't the issue. So I've already got this one off, already got it opened up. I'm gonna keep this head gasket as an extra in case, you know, whatever, we'll mark it as used. And for now, brand new head gasket, Cat Part 3H 8008. I'm gonna clean up this head a little bit where that gasket was, and then we'll reinstall that and close everything up. So I've made a lot of gaskets for this machine so far, but a head gasket is not one I want to make. They're typically what are called MLS, multi-layer steel. And so there's a steel layer on the outside, another on the inside, and then between it is like a paper gasket of sorts. And so when it comes to head gaskets, those are gaskets that I buy, because I just don't want to mess with having something go wrong with it. Got the head all cleaned up, ready to put back on. The torque spec for these bolts is 30 foot-pounds, so that's what we're going to try and do if we can get it all. It's really hard to show you this because of everything in the way. Looks about the same as the other one did. Rust, crap buildup in the lower passages. Just general carbon buildup. Same here. I don't see any major damage to the gasket either, just like the other side was. Looks like the valves are opening and shutting correctly. No scoring in the piston or in the cylinder on the cylinder walls, so that's good. Sweet. Well, let's just clean this one up just like that other side, put the new gasket in, and move on to the next potential issue. Alright, so this is the other side of the pony motor. This is the other, basically, head. This is the block right here. And then we've got the 2 valves and the cylinder. And this is the actual piston head. And so these 4 ports are what the coolant flows through to cool the motor down when it's running. The way it works is essentially the pistons go in and out, and I'll show you that here. Luckily, both pistons on both sides look great. The valves are both seating properly. This one does have some pitting in the top here, but I'm not overly concerned about it. This one looks nicer than this one. But really, at the end of the day, these motors were not made to run for very long. It's moving over by hand perfectly. There are no scores on this cylinder either, as far as like scratches on the cylinder wall. So I'm very confident that the rings are perfectly fine. I cleaned up the whole face of this, and just like the other side, we're going to go ahead and replace the head gasket. Even though it didn't look that bad, they were fairly affordable and available right when I needed them, so I went ahead and got them. So all in all, I am very, very excited to see that this is not a bigger problem than I thought it was. Now, I still haven't diagnosed what caused the issue or what the issue was, and so we're going to keep kind of tearing into the top here and try and figure it out. But for right this minute, we're going to put this head back together and move on. We've got the head all cleaned up and ready to go back on. Alright, now we're going to remove the governor here from the pony motor. Alright, so this is the exhaust, one of the exhaust pipes that leads over to the other side of the pony motor. I'm going to take it off because I want to see on the other side. And on the other side, a couple bolts are loose anyway. Don't drop nuts in blind holes. Luckily, I got that one. Alright, here we have the pony motor starter parts, essentially. So this is the starter itself, and the way it works is, just like with any starter, when electric power is put to the actual electric starter motor, it causes this gear to spin out on the shaft, and then it turns. Basically, it pushes out, turning this gear. And that gear then extends, reaches into this housing here and engages with this gear. And then that then turns a belt that goes down to the starter pulley on the actual pony motor, starting it up. One issue that we had here was right here where this is where the pony motor oil fill, which is what this is. This piece would stick out of the top of the machine, and you'd put the oil for the pony motor right in this cap. Well, it fits down onto this, right like this. So, we were having oil leaking out of the pony motor because there was absolutely no gasket here. No gasket there, and I don't even think that was the bigger of the two problems. The other issue we were having is there should have been a gasket down here on the bottom of this plate where this hole is at. And so oil was getting heated up, and then it was just leaking out of those two cracks, making it so that it was losing oil, is getting all over the place. It caused it to smoke real bad. And so that isn't what caused the issue, but that is the issue that we're going to correct right now. And then there's a gasket right here that is bad. Looks like at some point when it was installed it got pinched down into here. So we're going to have to make a new one for this too. Alright, since we have this out, we're going to take a peek in the back end of this starter. There sure is quite a lot of copper anti-seize in there. So right in here are the brushes for the motor. So this is essentially the brush card, and you have 4 brushes, and they're spring loaded, and then these 2 wires, there's a screw hole there and a screw hole there, they bolt to the actual windings, and the brushes are getting pretty worn down on this, really low. And crazy thing, all the stuff that I get used and I find, I happen to have new old stock brushes. They are exactly what go right into here. Let's see, I think it's this one. It is the same. Yeah, they're pretty much the same. So they'll bolt right into there. And so because I have them and because I've got it out now, we're going to put them in. Might as well. So all they have is a little flathead screw here that bolts through the hole down onto the spring part. And so we'll just unbolt each one individually, bolt a new one in, put it back together. Now you can see the difference between a brand new brush and the length of it and a worn down brush and how close it's coming to this actual spring loaded, basically the tensioner that lets it ride on the commutator. Whether or not it actually needed them or should have done them, I mean, obviously, just like everything with Old Red, it's a ton of maintenance that has never been done or hasn't been done in a long time. So, got lucky and I happen to have these, so I'm going to go ahead and throw them in there. Here's a quick view of a brand new one, Delco Remy, versus a worn down one. And you can just see how small it is. Motor's been cranked a few times. Very, very similar to that worn electric winch. Inside of there, the windings look very similar. Simple little machine. Very good shape too. Not an ounce of corrosion anywhere. There we go. So this gasket that was kind of just around that is kind of just falling apart. I've got some similar old thick cardboard type gasket that I'm going to make a new one out of. There we go. Perfect. And then that ring will go right around there. With the bolt in it, holding it tight. And yet again, another reason why I keep the scraps when I make gaskets. Because it saves me money, and a lot of times I can just grab a piece of an old one and use it to make the new one. Gotcha. There we go. Alright, on this starter pulley, this bearing sounds a little rough. I actually have some new old stock that'll fit it, so we're going to go ahead and replace it. It's a bearing puller. It grabs below it. So you tighten it up as best you can. And usually you use another puller, or there's threaded holes there, but this should be fine. Like that. You can see how it grabbed on the bottom side of that that bearing. It basically captures it, leaving the shaft to put the new bearing on. Alright, new old stock bearing. It's a 6201, same size hole. Well, that's not the same. Nope. Time to get my box of bearings out. So I bought all these new old stock bearings from a local electric motor repair company. They had a ton that they just were never going to use. It's always nice for me to have stuff on hand. Then I don't have to run out and buy anything. But I need to organize this a little better. There we go. Smooth as can be. Alright, so this is the exhaust pipe for the pony motors. So this would be on one side, this on the other. And right here, there was no gasket on this side of the exhaust. And I believe oil was leaking out up there. You can see it, you know, it's all over, built up here. So, we're going to look through some of the gaskets that I found out in the old barn. So this drawer has a lot of my gaskets and different, you know, some of them are good, some of them are old, some of them aren't any good. But this pile I found in the old barn where Old Red was located. And these are the new MLS multi-layer steel gaskets that I need. So there's these two, and then this one that meets up with the diesel exhaust. So I'm going to clean them up a little bit, and then we're going to put them on the machine. So we got one there, and one there. My wire wheel came untightened. Tighten that baby back up. These are the two ports that mount on the top of the pony motor. This one is perfectly flat and smooth and has kind of a recess in it. This one is almost inverted. This one that doesn't have a recess, it's proud, it's sitting up higher, and there's a lip on the outside. And it looks like it was just improperly made, so I'm gonna run a file across this, clean this up, and smooth it back out, because the gasket is really what needs to do the surface, and this should be as flat as it can be to be able to make the best amount of contact. You can just see the lines where it's hitting the high spots, and all the darker areas is where it hasn't actually touched the face of it yet. And so we're still working our way down. I was moving around a little, so I added these soft jaws. So now you can see it's much smoother. Completely flat all the way across. That'll give me a good surface for that gasket to meet up and seal properly. I'm going to run the file across this one real quick too. This is the governor. The governor, essentially, for the pony motor. And when you engage the throttle, it's supposed to spring back. And it's not. I'm going to open up this cover and see what's going on here. Maybe the spring is just not strong enough, but it's not moving. This seems fine, the belt, but there is a crack on this little cap here, and so I'm going to pull this open, just see what's going on in there, if anything, and then we'll put it back together. I don't have another one of these. The other parts machine did not come with any kind of pony motor parts. Well, that's not true. I guess it did come with the magneto and a few other parts, but very, very few parts. There was no pony motor, and so I don't have this part. This bolt somehow got bent. I think that's what caused it to crack this little ear off. This is pretty stiff. I don't see any real problems in there though. I'm going to clean this out, try and loosen this mechanism up a bit. Alright, after a little brake cleaner, I'm able to get this thing way looser. We're going to throw some 3-in-1 oil in there. Decided to change out the flatheads with some actual Allen head cap screws. That'll do. Alright, so now we got it back together. You can see that return spring is returning, pulling the mechanism back how it should. It should have that recoil. And like you saw before, you'd pull it and it would get stuck there. And I thought maybe the spring wasn't strong enough, but it's plenty strong and it's not totally stretched out. It's just, it was so gunked up with oil and grease in there that it was just didn't want to barely move. So that'll definitely help once we get it back on the pony motor. Cleaned up all the mating surfaces, cleaned up the pulley a little bit. One thing to note with these pony motors is that to shut them off, you don't basically turn the switch to off. You shut the fuel off. And ideally that would be done right here. You'd screw this straight in and it would shut off the valve, allowing fuel down past this section of basically this is a sediment bowl, through the line out to the carburetor. Well, back at the barn when I first got the machine, I cleaned this out and everything seemed fine, but this shutoff did not work. And so what I did thereafter was I bought a cheap lawnmower shutoff valve and I installed it in line. And so For those of you that commented and basically say I might have messed up the motor because I wasn't shutting off the fuel, I always shut the fuel off. Ever since the very first time I used it, I basically learned that you had to shut the fuel off. And so, other than the only time that I didn't do it was when the issue with the pony motor happened, after the pop happened, it was flustered or whatever, and so I didn't shut off the fuel, and so it did leak down into the oil and basically thin the oil out. But that was after the issue, and I have not started or tried to start it since. I've already changed the oil in it, and so for now, I'm just going to go ahead and continue to use this shut off when I want to shut the pony motor off. I'd like to find a correct shut off valve here that's in proper order and working. The only downside is, to shut it off, you have to twist a whole bunch of times. And I like this one because it's just on or off, and it's quick. And so it doesn't look the part, it doesn't fit with the machine, but at the end of the day, it's been doing what I needed it to do for now, and so I'm going to stick with that until I find a better option. Alright, we got all the pony motor add-ons and attachments and other pieces that need to get bolted back onto the pony motor here, ready to rock and roll. This is the air cleaner for the pony motor, the governor, the starter, the fuel gaskets, nuts, you name it. All these parts are ready to bolt back on, and we're going to put it back together, and honestly, we're going to see. We'll see if it turns over. I think it's going to be fine. I really do. After having seen the inside of the cylinders and the valves, I'm really not too concerned about having big problems with the pony motor like I did think. So we'll talk a little bit more here in a bit about what I think happened. Through some research that I've done, I've come up with a theory. I don't know for sure because I really didn't find any problems. And so, because there were no major red flags problems, I don't think there was as big a problem as I thought. And honestly, that is a great thing to find out, because you just absolutely never want to find bad problems. Next up, putting the pony motor back together.
I might have found our problem.